So I did a poll a while back, asking if Wuthering Waves was in the cyberpunk universe, who would be the first to go cyber psycho? And some of you tunes didn't hesitate to chime in giving me your opinion. But honestly, hey man, all I can say is, the last shall be first, and the first last. For many be called, but few chosen. Matthew 20:16. Oh, you thought I was preaching? I ain't trying to preach to you. I'm just saying, if this were to happen, the levels of devastation would be biblical. So, out of this lot, who would be the first? What is the order of intensity? To be able to properly explain and classify these characters through the lens of cyberpunk in a way that even the uninitiated can understand, we first have to dive into cyberpsychosis and explain it. How do people get it? And just what it is. In the world of cyberpunk edge runners, as well as in the whole cyberpunk universe, cyberpsychosis plays a huge role. People who have it are called cyberpsychos. And the definition of the word is pretty much in the name itself. It's a portmanteau of the words cybernetic and psychosis. Cybernetic, which is separate from its scientific meaning, because that means something totally different. But in the sci-fi pop culture genre, it's used to mean cyborg-like body augmentations. Of course, psychosis, it's basically when someone loses touch with reality, finding it hard to discern what's real and what isn't, characterized by hallucinations, delusions, and disorganized thought and speech. Stick with me through this explanation because this will be part of the basis I use to explain how the people most at risk in our hypothetical cyberpunk weathering world might not be who you think. For those who are familiar with the Edge Runner series, you already know some of the causes of cyberpsychosis. It's a mental illness caused by installing too much cyberware, aka cybernetics, aka body mods, aka augmentations, aka metal, aka chrome. What I'm saying is, it has a lot of names. Nonetheless, the premise is get too much chrome and it won't be too long before you're geeking out and then turning full-blown cyber psycho. Cause let's keep it real, we all know someone whose neighbor took the chrome a little too far. Am I right? These cybernetics jack straight into your nervous system and into your brain. And the human mind just wasn't designed to have that much taxing overload. And eventually, some people snap. And when they do, when they do. Imagine this. Someone with artificially increased lung capacity, amping up their stamina, augmented legs for increased jumping ability, modified arms for physical strength, super speed and 30 times the normal reaction time. Oh, and deployable arm cannons. So if for whatever reason this person disassociates from reality with this kind of power, it's a recipe for chaos. Saying cyberpsychos are dangerous is an understatement. If you're a normie in NC, you better have max tack on speed dial if you spot one, because it's about to be a bloodbath. There's a lot I can say about cyberpsychos, but I'm not going to overload you guys on terms on the front end. I'll explain a little bit more in bits and pieces as we go along. So, obviously, the characters in Wuthering Waves universe get their abilities from resonance and not cybernetics. But what if they did? Just like the characters in Cyberpunk, what if they got their abilities from chroming the f up? There's no definitive true answer on how things would play out, but based on the lore of both worlds, here's how I think things would go. First up, Scar, our dependable chaotic villain. Despite what people predicted in the polls, my perspective is quite different. I think Scar might be the least likely to go cyber psycho, but I say this with an asterisk. I'll explain that in a second. Scar does have the aura of a chaotic, mentally unstable person, and this would normally lend itself to the notion that they would be quick to go cyber psycho, but outside of his sinister smiles, when you really delve into Scar's lore and worldview, you find out that he's more of a complicated character than you might have thought. Scar's personal philosophy is all about the attainment of power, while at the same time advocating that everyone should have access to that very same power. He's like a superpower socialist. He believes that people who don't have powers should attain power, or die. Yeah. Hey, he's a socialist, but he's an avid believer in survival of the fittest. So there's a character in the Cyberpunk franchise known as Atom Smasher. Atom Smasher essentially replaced everything with cybernetics. Not much is left of Atom Smasher the man. Anyone who isn't fully converted, he looks down upon them, calling them meat. Now, we won't dive too much into his backstory, but Atom Smasher's full conversion wasn't much of a choice. But based on Scar's personal perspective and worldview, I could totally see him willingly abandoning the flesh to become a full-on Borg. And being a Borg, Atom Smasher doesn't have the hallmarks of typical cyber psychos, and he doesn't ever lose control or disassociate. However, the creator of Cyberpunk refers to Atom Smasher as a high-functioning cyber psycho. And while Scar is the least likely with an asterisk, Frolova is probably the character least likely to go cyber psycho from a traditional standpoint. But I put Scar before her because Borgs aren't really out there having police or special forces called on them. They usually work in tandem and they don't usually go cyber psycho in the practical sense. Her natural abilities block senescence, which is basically the process that cells go through that lead to aging. On top of this, a core component of Frolova's abilities is self-reconstruction. Within minutes, or really within seconds depending on the injury, she can completely restore herself. So she's essentially an eternal being. So whatever cybernetics she'd have to grant her the rest of her abilities would also have to have a support system that actively heals all damage. And this would technically protect her against neurodegenerative diseases. However, this wouldn't really do much to prevent psychological issues and mental illnesses that might develop due to lived experience. With that said, how would she have this much power from cybernetics yet still operate with a sound mind? Well, Frolova is ever level-headed. She never screams or yells in frustration or surprise. Her long life has perhaps granted her wisdom and patience. Nearly every line delivered by her is done so in a monotone whisper, as if even the unexpected wasn't outside of her realm of perceived possibility. Not only this, but despite the grim, dark aura that precedes her, she's probably one of the most hopeful characters we've met so far. She's like a whole hope factory. A bit misguided, but she is ever hopeful. And for hundreds of years, she's held on to the possibility that she can somehow resurrect the people of her hometown. With this said, we can say she's pretty safe from going cyber psycho. However, if that hope is ever lost, man, there would just be nothing left at that point. The amount of unstoppable, unkillable, uncontained, pure psychotic rage would be absolutely devastating. Solaris 3 would be a husk of its current state. Camellia. So Camellia has a documented history of overclocking. Overclocking is like the Wuthering Waves equivalent to cyberpsychosis. And by equivalent, I mean not even close. There are people who overclock and they go on to live pretty much normal lives afterwards. In fact, it's even a requirement for sentinel resonators to overclock to complete their resonance process. Experiencing cyberpsychosis in Cyberpunk isn't just a slight inconvenience you walk away from. In fact, most people who experience it have to be put down due to how dangerous they are and the sheer carnage they cause while experiencing it. And this disorder never really goes away. So most instances of people having it end in death. In rare cases where people get help, this involves regular medication, downgrading most, if not all, of their cyberware, and regular counseling sessions. People usually aren't even remotely the same afterwards. Camellia has a documented history of overclocking, and she continues to overclock to this very day, while the average resonator, or at least most of those we've seen so far, seem to recover and live normal lives without continuing to relapse. I think some people mentioned in the comments that she'd be more like Atom Smasher, but I don't even think she has the constitution for that. As her history of mental instability and overclocking, it goes way, way back. She would have likely been put down before she even had the chance to get to that point and make that decision. To understand why Cartithia is at the top of this list, I think we have to understand a bit more about the triggers for cyberpsychosis. Based off of what we discussed so far, it's clear that excessive chrome isn't the only factor in developing cyberpsychosis. And some people online had some questions after noticing how some people go cyberpsycho while others just be chill. And the actual creator of the Cyberpunk series, Mike Pondsmith, aka Maximum Mike, chimed in on Reddit, and he had a lot to say. Now, we won't go over every single detail of his response, but the basic gist of what he's saying is, just like how everyone who drinks doesn't become an alcoholic, not everyone is susceptible as others when it comes to the downsides of cyberware. So things like past trauma, physical stressors, family and support systems, and just overall humanity play a factor in whether someone goes cyberpsycho or not. So when it comes to Cartithia, her trauma runs deep. Her family and support systems were wiped in an instant. The moment she was crowned Blessed Maiden, they were gone, just like that. Memories wiped. Constantly hearing the voices and prayers of citizens while also hearing the Thenodian voice always in her head. Couple this with the required cyberware to reach her lore-accurate power. Man, because remember, her cyberware would essentially have to be at a level where she could essentially injure a god. Not to mention, she still has hallucinations to this very day about destroying villages, and hallucinations are the first symptom of cyberpsychosis. So the only question left would be, who will be responsible for putting her down? I feel like that would just be Chapter 2, Act 11 all over again, only with her as the villain this time. But let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. I was actually planning to talk a little bit more about the Fraxidus and how their body modifications work and how the way they affect people isn't too dissimilar to Cyberpunk, but I couldn't really find a way to connect it without going on for too long. So maybe that's something I might think about for another video. By the way, I know I don't mention this very often, but I have a Discord. So if you want to talk lore, character builds, or just hang out with like-minded individuals, link is in the description. But anyways, folks, that is all I have for you guys today. And until next time, Waves.